Good afternoon, everybody, and maybe good morning to one or two of you, or even good evening if you're calling in from other parts of the world to today's IMBA Summit and for 2021. And we're absolutely delighted to announce we have a record number of registrations, and it's very, very good to have everybody here. I'm your moderator for the day. My name is the Chief Executive of Cycling Industries Europe and a board member of IMBA Europe. Why connecting industry and IMBA, which is the kind of users federation? Well, it's clear from our association's point of view, great bicycle industry depends on great communities and great places to ride. It's the bottom of the pyramid on which we build. The work of IMBA Europe is important to us, and I'm privileged that I was invited to be a board member of Europe so we can build on that relationship. It's an interesting 2021 summit. If I look back for the same time last year, we had the 2020 event. And the 2020 event, we were talking about when would mountain biking really open up and would there be a recovery? And I guess a year later, in many ways, for many parts of our sector, we're now gone from kind of recovery to boom, or boom in the whole of the bicycle world. But actually, when it comes to mountain biking, there's a heck of a lot we don't know. And in order to go and in order to really plan and coordinate and build, I'm delighted that the IMBA Europe team and its members and others are looking forward strategically and just asking questions like, is this really sustainable? How do we be sustainable? Even more importantly, who are all these new mountain bikers? Are they families on greenways? Are they the pent-up demand of people who wanted adventure sports and were locked up at home? And where does the e-bike come into making this whole sport and activities just so much more accessible? So we've got to see as answers as we go into today. Hopeful. We have a kind of panels full of people who have lots of answers to debate, to discuss. And if our colleagues in the agenda, I'd be delighted to highlight for the first time ever have the EU. Interesting how EU and sport come together and with economics and social values. We have national representatives, we have companies, and we have communities. And I think that's the picture of mountain biking, where all those different components come together. It makes for a super summit. I hope it's of great value to you, and how we look at how we can make our whole sector future-proofed, sustainable, inclusive, economically viable, and for me, above all, for everyone. So that's enough from me. I said we had a great lineup. I'm going to kick off. First off, we're going to have two keynotes from two important players in our sector. And it is the first time we've had here at our seminar. And you're also going to get, so please don't hesitate to use questions through the chat. I see lots of hellos, that's really great. But make sure you flag them up, and then we'll have time for one or two questions to the keynotes at the end of this session, and the team will pick out a couple for us to put in front of them. But for our keynotes, first keynote is Peter Fischer, who is responsible for outdoor sports at the European Union. And I mean, Peter, he tells us he's a passionate cyclist. That's a damn good place to start, and a mountain biker, which is really, really good. But he's really here because he's a coordinator for our sports and has in youth and culture and many linked activities. An player in building sport, the EU. So I'm delighted to welcome Peter, and Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon from Brussels. Thanks for the welcome. Thanks for having me. Yes, I'm indeed a passionate cyclist, so it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon with you. I do have a mountain bike. I'm more a cyclist on dirt tracks or the forest. Mountain biker that some may be. But still, I'm a mountain biker, so I'm glad to be here. I have a few slides for you to tell you about my work and the work of the European Commission. I do work in the sport unit of the Director General for Education and Culture, Sport and Youth. And in particular, I'm coordinating an expert group on green sport. The slides, please. Right, next. So the okay, I think there's a go to the next slide, please, and then I think we'll have to go back. There's a mix-up, I believe. Yeah. So first, I wanted to talk about the EU work plan for sport, which is the basis for the work that we do in the Commission and that I do. The EU work plan for sport is a 3-year plan that has identified 3 key areas. Which you can see on the screen, including a second one, the socio-economic and environmental dimensions of sport. And as on our to-do list was the creation of 2 Commission experts group, one on green sport and one for the recovery of the sports sector after the COVID-19 pandemic. So now go back 1 slide, please. Yes, so what is it that we do in this expert group? What do these expert groups do? They are chaired by the Commission. They are composed of member state experts. They are civil servants who work in the public sectors and should ideally be experts in the field. So 2 slides down, please. Then what do we do and how do we go about this business? Well, it's very much about best practice exchange, knowledge building, finding out what good practices exist, raise awareness about sustainable practices. And of course, we have regular meetings and take note of the progress that is achieved in those meetings. Next, please. Well, we have, of course, also members of the sport movement represented in those meetings. The first meeting was not open to observers, but the next meeting, which is actually tomorrow, is open to members of the sport movement. That is, if they have a key role in the sector and they are, representing a crucial number of actors, ideally at the European level. And for the outdoor sector, we have, for instance, a member from the European Network of Outdoor Sport. So next, please. What is the main objective of this expert group? Well, it's here in bold. You can see that the task is to come up with a common framework for sustainable sport with shared commitments by all member states, and that should be achieved by the end of 2023. So we are at the beginning of this process. As I said, tomorrow is the second meeting, and in a moment I will show you the 5 key areas which are quite broad, on which the expert group will concentrate. You can see also on the slide that the French EU presidency is considering to have perhaps a council resolution in the area of a green pact for sport. That is at least a possibility the French are considering, and perhaps the expert group will be able to provide some useful input for that. Next slide, please. Well, as promised, here are the key areas that were identified at our first meeting and which are partially also indicated in the EU work plan for sport. Sport infrastructure in all its dimensions, the construction, the maintenance, but also its impact on the climate or the environment, including biodiversity, etc. Then, of course, the organization of sport events, and not only major sport events. For those, we often have sustainability concepts, but there's many smaller events that are organized, and they may be not as well prepared to deal with issues of sustainability. A third element is innovative cross-sectoral solutions. Well, what is that? There, the idea is to look at all the different areas where there can be solutions or problems, or how can, you know, a negative impact of sport on the climate or biodiversity, nature, be mitigated. And I think this is an area where also the outdoor sport sector is of interest and will be impacted, and good advice will be welcome and hopefully established in that expert group. A fourth element is, of course, the promotion and knowledge sharing to a wider public about sustainable sport practices, sport practitioners and federations, and then, of course, also ideally at grassroots level. And a fifth element is how can the sport movement contribute and cooperate with the European Climate Pact. And there it's all about identifying Climate Pact ambassadors, getting sports organizations to make pledge in a way to make the European Green Deal and this Climate Pact a success. Next, please. That's already the end of my presentation. I have a few links at the end of the presentation. I know I don't have too much time, but I suppose for the sports sector and the mountain bike community in particular, as well as anyone else who's interested in EU funding, here are some useful links that you can take a closer look at. I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. And it's, I mean, it's not often we get that overview of kind of everything and the key values in sport. So that's, you know, really encouraging to see. And many people, you know, I don't suppose the EU first institution one thinks of. One thinks of sport, one thinks of all the governing bodies and you. So it's great to get that kind of picture. What we'll do is take those questions in the chat, give you a moment to reflect as an audience. So our next, my colleague and friend and our president, so he's to be presidential with everything that means. But Thomas Larsen Schmidt is a consultant for the Danish Sports Federation, which has 6,300 associations affiliated. And he's working for 1.5 million Danes to try to get them into outdoor life, given also his commitment to mountain biking over many years. So Thomas, give us a flavor of the IMBA strategy.
Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for those kind words. But I would like to send a small greeting to Peter and just mention that I am also a mountain biker. So now there's two of us, at least on this summit. My name is, like you said, Thomas Larsen Schmidt. I'm of IMBA Europe, and I'm really proud to be here today. I think we have great panels and we have great people on board to talk about many of the different societal challenges and great trails can help out with. I would like to talk today about our new strategy. I'll try to keep it short. People who know me will know that this is today's big challenge for me. We used to have great strategies, but with this new that we talked to our members about in December and they approved, is actually taking some of the good stuff we've been working with for so many years and then saying, okay, we do all the advocacy, we talk about sustainable trails, we will try to live so they can work advocacy and they can get to have better lives through exercise and so on. Do we actually say this in our strategy? So what we do is all the good stuff out of the good we do in IMBA Europe, that into strategies. It's more clear that we want to be part of the solution. We want what we attempt to try to help out with some of the challenges. So IMBA Europe create and coordinate sustainable trails. And we are the only organization to address these opportunities at the EU. We also want to be top with organizations, government bodies, industry, environmental organizations, and we want to be a driving force behind European in the field of training and education, for working with an Erasmus project called Builder Education. We are part of this better progress connection with parks and outdoors. We want to be at the forefront of of mountain bike related themes. So we're working to become IMBA's mission strategy. Our vision is quite to get more people on through sustainable mountain biking. And the mission towards that, we actually want to improve people's with better health. We want to climate more easy access to sustainable mountain bike and shared use trails, to home rides, to iconic backcountry experience. We want to make Europe a mountain bike friendly place. And we also want to grow the diversity of cycling, the quality. So with that said, and time running, I will be true to my pledge at the beginning. I will keep this brief and I will respect the time that was given to me here. And I will give the word back to Kevin Main. And I would like to say thank you for this opportunity to be in such participants listening in. So thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. And putting that together with Peter is really interesting. And I mean, there'll be the odd question from the audience, I'm sure, specifically. And one of the specific questions was, Peter, can we have all your links? Which, of course, Lauren in the back office has said already we'll share those, because there's always an enthusiasm when there might be some money on the table. So then, plus I'm sure. I think it's true. What you have in common is you're talking about sport in terms of outcome. Sport does some impacts, but and positive impact. Is that we're hearing that the sports is kind of not enough, that we have of outcomes? Peter, you're a policy guy. Do sports need to stand up about their outcomes?
Say is for an important economic factor inside the EU. Sport has a great famous athlete, especially discover the beauty of being allowed and able to be outdoors, and perhaps also in the area of mountain biking has actually led to some excesses in some areas. I've seen some trails and forests which were pretty out of shape. But I think it's a recognition of those different factors that contribute to this. And economic dimension is one, but the natural and environmentally friendly sport is that should also, which is an important side. This should, and nations out if they will be endorsed, perhaps by some kind of council conclusions. Although this is not a boost ability let's say, additional credentials to the sport movement, and ideally we will get to the expert group, a good practice followed by many people involved in the sport sector.
Thank you.
It's important that organization of the framework. So we try, together with national organization framework, local, regional groups, municipalities, and so on, tools to use the framework, have to making more trails close to home, so the more people towards the trail far away. So I think it's on that response to build that and gives that opportunity for local communities to be more and more aligned and have better opportunities to work with, to solve issues, problems, or whatever, to use the trail as a tool towards nature conservancy, guides people. They won't ride in another area where it's very delicate natural environment. So making that framework is super important for the national organizations and for IMBA Europe on that responsibility. So it's done.
Thomas, we a moment to do through, and I just going back to this. You have the kind of uniquely opportunity at a European level. Bike's incredibly low, and yet we're talking about, the Euro high-level body. IMBA Europe is a kind of very kind of high stuff. Peter says on. Is it right that we have this kind of European dimension over the top of? Thomas first, and I'll get Peter to finish up with saying, what's the unique European added value here?
Well, I think it's I think it's super important to have all the knowledge that grows and are being taken in the national organizations together to be to the EU, to IMBA US, and having that bigger perspective and bringing those people together to share knowledge, to give to each other, and to lift the level of competencies and knowledge. It's super important, and tap into the right cooperations with the right, like in the Sea Project, work together with Europark, work together with ENOS and other organizations that also operate on a European level. We share knowledge, we get to know each other, and we start to make common solutions. This is just, we can't live without it. We just need a little bit more money, I guess.
Peter.
Yes, I mean, I hear the question and I understand where you're coming from, but I really don't see actually, it's not, for me, it's not two different parts, the local level and the EU level. I mean, we have to work together, and the idea is to reach a maximum of people with, with important knowledge and expertise that is out there and can and needs to be shared. Furthermore, what I would like to say is that we also invited, or I reached out to the UN Climate Action Secretariat. They were active in the field of climate action for sports framework. So it's important to bring in the key players so that we can build on existing work and then see how it can be relevant and translate it into action at local level. And maybe a final word is we have a number of European federations present who will then share the information at national level, and then it's a question how federations will share that down to the local level. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
I acknowledge for grassroots it might be a bit trickier, but
Yeah.
we'll look into that as well.
And thanks both, I mean, for referencing that it's UN and others, and we, you know, there's a large proportion of non-EU Europe and friends and colleagues in IMBA on this call. That's great. I think concluding that, Peter, I think you'll say you'll hear from us. We've got one of our most large and vigorous member communities in France, and we've got the biggest bicycle retailer in the world that happens to be a French company coming up later on. So if the French presidency is the target, I have little doubt they will hear from us from our communities in the coming 2 years for this program. So to you both, thank you. Virtual applause, I'm sure, from the floor, and thanks for your contribution to kicking off today's session so positively. With that, we're going to move now to the series of 3 panels that run through the course of the day, and we're going to kick off with our diversity panel. And I am delighted to introduce my colleague, Mark. Everybody talks about everybody being the hardest working person in mountain biking, but if you've got to run the IMBA Europe office, Mark Torsis has to be one of the hardest working people in mountain biking, and he's going to carry on working by chairing the first panel. So moderating the first panel. So Mark, over to you.
Thank you very much for your kind words, Kevin. And don't forget that I got a really hard-working board helping me out as well. I'm really glad that so many people joined this session. There's a huge ambition in front of us while we've been drafting this new strategy. And one of the things that we shortly mentioned, or Thomas shortly mentioned, is diversity and inclusion. And it's the first time that that topic has been addressed by IMBA Europe in its working plans or strategies. And there's still a long way to go, I think. We need to learn, we need to listen to all the experts before we're gonna be prepared to take any good actions. But we have a really good panel here. There's a long way to go, as I've said. Like, the current data on diversity and inclusion are not that encouraging. We've seen a bit of a shift in terms of the number of women participating in our sports, but on all other aspects, I think there's still a long way to go. And diversity and inclusion has different faces, I would say. It's not only about ethnicity, it's also about adapted sports. It's about job opportunities in the industry. Which brings me to our panelists for today. Really happy to have them here, all with a completely different background. The first one to introduce is Anila McKenna, the founder of More Diversity, diversity, inclusion, and well-being consultancy business. But she's been in the game for a long time. She's also an advisor for the Scottish government on diversity and inclusion. Is a mountain bike guide, is an instructor, runs a tour operator called Go West Scotland, and has experience in the cycling sector for more than 10 years, and even as a diversity and inclusion well-being professional for more than 20 years. So we are delighted to have her on this panel. Our second panelist is from Sweden, from one of our member organizations, Cykel Framjoldet. Back to the slide. Yeah, sorry for that. Stefan Longren works as a project manager at Cykel Framjoldet, the Swedish national cycling advocacy organization. And he's a mountain bike rider, guide, coach, trail builder himself. He does it all. And he's currently leading a new trail cycling project aimed at young people with ADHD and autism. And the aim of that project is to lower the threshold and increase the opportunities for outdoor life and physical activity for this group. And last but definitely not least, and very welcome for Brooke Hopper, who is based in the United States. So this is a really early morning session for her. Thank you very much for that. Brooke is the global marketing manager of Lift Cycling, which is part of Giant Bicycles, a true leader, a women leadership role in the bicycle industry. So really keen to have her on this panel. In her role, she oversees all the product marketing, sports marketing, digital marketing, communications, and public relations. So happy to have you all here. What we're going to do, we're going to run this panel by, I'll start asking you with some questions, and the audience, the viewers, can submit their questions in the chat as well. We have a few minutes for that at the end to go to those kind of questions. I'd like to start with Anila. Like sports in general have a unique ability to bring people together from all walks of life. But why do you think has the mountain bike community never been able, or not as good, to do the same? And why is our culture or image, or maybe the composition of people that practice mountain biking such a big obstacle for marginalized groups to join our sport?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Yes, it's a good question. You know, you have to think about mountain biking and where mountain biking has come from. It's a relatively early sport, isn't it? It's come from the late 70s, 80s, and predominantly men have been in that sport. And it's only been in the last 5 years, really, from my own experience, that we've seen more women come into the industry, women being represented within mountain biking. So we're starting to see some progress, aren't we? But, you know, in the last year, we have really seen a real shift in mountain biking. I would say there's been an awakening, and that's just the start of the journey, isn't it? It's the start of a journey to say, yes, we have a problem. Yes, we know that there are people less privileged to participate in mountain biking. So how can we get those groups accessible? How can we make mountain biking accessible to them? And culture of mountain biking, I think one of the things about the culture, there's a perception that it's hard, it's tough, it's competitive, it's gnarly, it's fast. And, you know, it's not like that. You know, we're lots of, you know, as we're talking about, you know, being different types of mountain bikers. And there needs to be an entry point into it that we all need to be supportive of and celebrating as well. And I think the way, in terms of media and brands and how it's represented, it's become this kind of hard sport. So we need to break that down. We need to break down and tackle this perception so we can open it up to all communities and think about aspects like affordability. You know, we don't all have to have the best bike. We don't have to wear the best clothes. And we could also think about access as well. You know, we talked, the host talked about e-bikes, thinking about where do trails start from geographically, how accessible are they to all users of bikes? And the other thing is around motivation as well. You know, how are people motivated to get into the sport? How, if you don't have a family member or a friend, how do you know that it's there for you? So yes, there is a good, we're in a good place at this moment in mountain biking, and even the fact that we're having this conversation today is superb. Yeah, so we do have to work together to change the narrative.
Yes. Talking about a threshold or being or considered as a hard sport, how would that be for you, Stefan, with working with a group of kids having ADHD or autism? Could you tell a little bit more about that project and where it comes from, and how hard it is, or maybe not, to get those people into the sports, and what kind of approach you've chosen?
Yeah. Okay, this project is aimed at young people with neurodevelopmental disorders such as ADHD and autism. It's government funded for 3 years. The inspiration for the project came from the Outright Foundation in the US, but mainly from a project that colleagues of mine heard about at the 2019 summit, IMBA Summit in Denmark. It's in Scotland, where mountain biking has been used for mental health. Super interesting. I think I saw the project manager was here in the chat, Graham. Yeah, and there's a lot of research behind this, why this can be good for this specific focus group. Research has shown that mountain biking can actually be even better than other forms of exercise. There are 3 factors behind this. I'll go through them briefly. It's kind of interesting. at least to me. To get your heart rate up, always good for anyone. But if you also do that in nature, there's other research showing that you can measure how the blood pressure drops and stuff like that. It's a great place to take stressed out people living in cities. Just in the woods, good things happen. So, and the third aspect is that you have to focus. If you're riding a mountain bike on trails in the woods, there's a small element of risk, right? For example, if you compare it to someone playing soccer, if you lose your concentration playing soccer, all you do is you're just a person standing on grass. Not much could happen, right? But if you lose your concentration riding a mountain bike on single track, there can be consequences. So that forces the brain to focus. And that in turn makes for a lot of good things to happen in the brain. And the positive effects of that, they can stay on for days after a good ride. And it can also help medication work better. Yeah, so we started in 2020 was the first year. And wasn't that a fantastic year to start anything at all? It was tough. No one wanted to talk to me about anything at all. And then quite unexpectedly, all bikes sold out. But I got a hold of a few bikes in late September, and we arranged 3 group rides, which was like a nice little pre-taste of what this project could be. Then Swedish winter hit hard, and I focused on finding more bikes, and I did. I've bought 33 mountain bikes for the projects. Really good. They haven't all been delivered, obviously, waiting on about half of them. But I have enough to be up and riding with a couple of groups, and yeah, super fun. Well received, of course, among kids and parents and people working with them. We're having a lot of fun.
So the best has yet to come, I guess. Mentioning like the lack of bikes, which brings us to the bicycle industry, Brooke. You're in a pretty unique position, I think. You know, as working at a brand like Live Cycling, completely focused on women's cycling. What are the current strategies that Live Cycling has in place to encourage better diversity and inclusion practices within the brand? What have you done so far?
Well, that's a great question, and thanks for having me. Can you guys hear me okay? Great. Well, Live is a part of the giant brand portfolio, but we are a standalone brand. And so at Live, we put women first in everything that we do. And you know, in a world where women are often not considered in the research, design, and development phase of a lot of products that we use every day, we think it's really important to create a community for women in a sport and an industry that's dominated by men. As a brand that's focused on women, I've noticed it's kind of a constant fight to get a seat at the table. And I come from the outdoor industry. I worked for the North Face on their marketing team for years. And to me, the industry is very far behind the rest of the world. It is very predominantly oriented to white men. And that is both within the industry, within the organizations, and on the trails. So I think there's a lot of work to do to create more community and to support women in a sport that really hasn't invested in them like they have in men. We have a lot of programs that we work on to accomplish this, and we know that it's a journey. You know, it's definitely not a sprint. It's a marathon, and we know that we need to do better and that we need to show better representation and to create a more inclusive industry that welcomes everyone. And to an earlier point, that is also, it isn't only gender, it's also looking holistically at what being inclusive means. And what we have focused on is really aligning on supporting different programs and just having the conversation in everything that we do. But when you think about my role, I am on a women's team in the bike industry. I work for women. I have women working for me, and I bet that we're the only all women team in any brand in the world. And it's what I learned this past year that was really poignant for me is that I have a white woman lens through which I see the world. And while I feel that I have to be fighting for women, because again, the industry and the sport is simply not a welcoming place for women. We also have to really look and see how we can join and welcome more communities of color. And I think I'll give you just a quote from one of our team writers. She wrote this essay, and I thought this really kind of says it all about our women first philosophy. And it's, you can't fight for women and not fight for Black women, trans women, disabled women, or any of the other intersections where anyone who identifies as a woman resides. I'm often asked, do women need to ride a women-specific bike? And I say, of course not. But we are constantly asked to justify our existence and told that what we're doing isn't necessary. And what I really struggle with is the fact that it's usually white men trying to tell women what they should or should not be riding. And so as a brand that's makes bikes and gear for women, it's, I'm constantly fighting just to even be in a shop or to have to be taken seriously. And I think that's really unfortunate, especially if you look at where the opportunities arise. And where we stand is really, it's like more choices is better for everyone. And we know that not all women are the same. So not all women are going to fit our bikes. And there are a lot of great bikes in the industry. At the end of the day, we just want to encourage and enable more women to get on the trail, on the road, and to actually see themselves through the programs, the athletes, the ambassadors, and all of, really, it's a holistic brand strategy that we're focused on. And again, we continue to learn because, that's, one pedal stroke at a time, as I like to say.
Yeah. Anila, is there also a bit of a problem that we don't yet see the value of a more diverse and inclusive mountain bike community? And if so, what should we do about it, and how can we, promote it? And what is the value of having a more inclusive mountain bike community?
Just listening to the other speakers and what Stefan and Brooke were saying there, I think particularly Stefan was talking about the health benefits of mountain biking, and just to think about making that accessible to everyone. At the moment, that opportunity, that happiness that we get from mountain biking and being in nature is only accessible to certain groups. It's exclusive. We mountain bikers do mountain biking because we connect to nature, we connect to the social aspect, we connect to mental health. But the value of it is those that are in most privileged positions, those that are vulnerable in society, those that are excluded or experience discrimination, can get that same opportunity too. So we all as individuals have to take a responsibility to see how can we give that to everybody. Not one group shouldn't exclusively benefit from that. And once you actually start to bring diversity into the community, it can bring so much more enriched experience, enriched perspectives. It means that you learn about other lived experience. And then that means those people around the table are different voices, and therefore those different voices represent those different issues. And so that in itself can be a wonderful thing. And what that ultimately can do in terms of value to businesses and brands and organizations, it can increase markets as well. Because there is, you know, we look at this like a moral issue, and it isn't absolutely a moral issue, but some people don't get that. And what I'm trying to do with my work as well, working with businesses as brands, is actually there's a business benefit to all of this as well, in the sense you can increase your markets, you can actually bring people from different communities into the sport. And ultimately, if you have those different voices, you're going to improve performance, you're going to have better creativity and innovation. So that is the value at all levels, right from the top all the way down to community. And if we open it up and see more people like ourselves, then like Brooke says, you have that choice. You have a choice. You don't have to just participate in a women-only event, or you can go into the mixed event. You can go into a women-only event. It's your choice. But that's, you know, ultimately Brooke's work is helping facilitate that. It's enabling women to come into that space to then make sure that that space is equal to everyone. So what can we do, Mark? What can we do? One thing I would say is use the trickle effect. And that trickle effect, and I'm starting to see it because of how many people write to me every day asking me for my advice on diversity and inclusion. And that's about setting standards, questioning how are you building diversity of thinking into your work. And if you're doing that at national level, companies will then start to think, okay, well, I've got certain standards to meet. I'm going to meet them. Companies then have to employ their photographers, their designers, their creative artists. And they're coming to me now saying, how do we get more people of color? How do we get those different voices? So you can start to see that trickle effect. And what that ultimately does is that changes behavior, and it changes behavior in a really positive way. So we can transform our thinking. That's what we have to do. We have to take some time, just take a step back, reflect, and think about those voices that we want to hear. And if we can do that through our storytelling, through you know, the way in which we communicate, the way in which we say that we are welcome to all, wow, what a wonderful place mountain biking will be. Because the community is wonderful as it is. We just need to bring everyone else into it.
Yeah. Brooke, could we say that we could hold businesses accountable and ask them to support a more welcome and diverse workforce, for instance, at this moment? I'm just hoping that we're not going to lose the kind of momentum that we have on this topic, and that like in 2 years we're back to the old situation. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with Anila that it's the trickle down, or there needs to be support from the top. I believe that the bike industry is very old school. They operate, you know, in a very, I guess, you know, top-down approach. And I have seen most success coming from the grassroots, and really supporting and encouraging their own companies to create a more inclusive workforce. Where I think we struggle in the bike industry really is in our pipeline. Again, there's not a lot of people of color who are or women, or you know, they don't see themselves in the bike industry because we don't market to them. I'll get a bicycle magazine and I'll go cover to cover to see if I can find a woman, and often I don't.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I think that what we need to do is look at it, you know, from all levels, which is, you know, where are we looking to hire people? Are we just going to the same place and saying, oh, no people of color are applying, so no women are applying, so we're going to hire another man? And to me, it's like, well, maybe we need to look at our strategy for recruiting. Maybe we need to go to historically Black colleges to go to employee or job fairs, you know, things that we can do systemically that will have really great impact on our industry in the long term. and again, where we sit, it's all about having more choices and seeing yourself where, like, in the industry. And right now, you know, it's definitely not happening. You know, I have to just bring up that the majority of people on this call are white, and also just acknowledging that that's unfortunate that we don't have more people of color represented here. Same with different leadership conferences. How do we encourage people of color, women, to want to, you know, be in the industry? Because frankly, it's a hostile place, and I'm grateful because I get to work with women, and I think that the industry is starting to see that diversity of thought is actually going to be what we have to do for our industry to succeed. And then we just need to welcome everyone to join us on our bikes, but we can't afford not to, especially with the, you know, cycling boom among youth, women, and people of color this past year. I hope that breaking trail for women and people of color as a brand will help us to continue to, you know, just take one step at a time. And again, we understand it's a journey, and it's not, sometimes you can stall out, but we need to keep moving forward. And that's a great point. Like, how do we keep this momentum going? It's really about again, continuing to welcome these new riders once the world opens again, to come back and to support them through digital content, you know, how-to videos, especially for women, when a bike shop isn't necessarily a safe space to enter, or nor do they get treated in a way that's nice or kind, or, you know, the problem is, in my opinion, it starts from the, you know, riders. And if people of color and women don't see themselves represented, or people like themselves represented, they're not going to feel like they're part of the community, or that they're welcome in the community. So I kind of went a little circular off topic there, but hopefully some of those nuggets will land.
No problem, no problem. It's such an interesting topic, and it's just a shame that we don't have enough time to do this for one more hour. I was just thinking, like, we've talked a bit about behavior, culture, identity, and how people construct identities, and all kinds of thresholds. What I've noticed is when I'm looking at urban infrastructure like pump tracks, I see a total different world, with kids of all kinds of backgrounds and girls playing on a pump track. Is that something like having infrastructure really close by? Is that something that will help us to work on diversity and inclusion? It's a general question for all of you. How do you see that? Will it help? Like, one of our kind of key phrases is more trails close to home, because that could be a threshold for some people as well. But like these kids, there seems to be much less of an issue of diversity and inclusion at that level, and in a sort of urban setting. How do you feel about that? Maybe Stefan, we haven't heard too much of you. How do you perceive that?
Well, yeah, that would make a tremendous difference if there were pump tracks and easier trails, beginner trails close to where people live, so they're not. I mean, that's also excluding people is if you have to take the car with your bike to a designated mountain bike area. So we're trying to work on that here in Sweden. I mean, it doesn't take much to make a small piece of forest a really nice playground for beginners. So yeah, we're working on it here.
I think that the urban park is that transition phase to mountain biking, because many communities, like many ethnic minority communities, are living the urban spaces, and therefore may not even know that the countryside exists where mountain biking is. I mean, I grew up in the city. I never went to the countryside until I was in my 20s. I only got introduced to cycling when I was in my 20s. My local green space was my local park. So if there were the opportunity for people like myself that, you know, geographical location is important, then, you know, if I had the opportunity to use a bike park or an urban, you know, pump track, that could be my transition to mountain biking. And I think that would be a great way of bringing in kids from different communities to participate in mountain biking for the generations, you know, for the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. We are running a little bit late. I got a signal. I wasn't watching time. Good to know. Sorry for that.
Can I make a quick comment on identity? Because I think it's really important. And I had a great learning over the last year and a half with some of my athletes. I'm always asking them to send me, you know, where they're seeing better representation from brands, whether social or in marketing materials. And as a brand for women, one of my riders sent me a specialized, I think it was specialized social post that showed a Black man. And I had this like really big, I guess, awakening and realized that he sees herself as Black first and then a woman second. So all of the work that we do to fight for women isn't going to be resonant if we're not also fighting for women of color or the trans community. There's so much we can do to help with the identity question and help people see themselves, you know, with us and part of us. But I had a great realization that, you know, my white woman lens was not seeing that not all women identify first as a woman and not all content will resonate as such.
Thank you for that final statement, Brooke. We're definitely going to be come back with you. I've seen some questions in the chat as well. There's a lot of interest in Stefan's program as well and how to grow that, I think, in different places. We will provide all the people that have been joining this session with follow-up links. So you can expect more questions in your inbox, Stefan, later on. For now on, I just want to thank all the panelists for the great contribution. And we need to move on to Kevin, who's going to do the moderation of the second panel. Thank you all for your contribution. And back to Kevin.
Thanks to Mark, and thanks to that panel for really setting the standard for, I think, not only sharing their knowledge, but provoking tough questions. And that's really, that's why we're here. So much appreciated by all of us. We've talked about inclusion of our sector and how that comes together. That there is a question, you know, we are in a phase that I hope we would all call growth. But behind that growth, there needs to be sustainability and the ability to make it, you know, survive, maybe continue. And I'm delighted that our second panel brings together a group of experts from very diverse backgrounds. And we have Morten Kamp Schubert, who is a mountain biker and entrepreneur, but he's been working in the world of mobile apps. And then, like many people, you know, can you turn that into your other love, which is your sport? And he's been working full time with Mountain Bike United, a community and an app on mountain bike trails. Martin Würdenbach is the head of environmental planning and research at the ZHAW Zurich University of Applied Sciences. And you know, he's been around the mountain bike world, founding IMBA and IMBA Swiss, but as an environmentalist, he's been looking at the impacts and the impacts of recreation in general. Matt Pierce from Patagonia, a brand I think synonymous with some of the environmental values and values that associate with this kind of work. Started his career in Northumberland, but is now in Amsterdam and working, I mean, great job description, working with communities, working with ambassadors, working with grassroots sports. So, and I left Clement Doby from Decathlon to last there because I just loved it when I checked in on his bio. There's a few people on our audience who would like to have a bio that says, I was a BMX professional. And then I took part in mountain bike World Cups. And then I'm into skiing and snowboarding and all kinds of sports. And then someone gives the man a job and he works decathlon on BMX and mountain bike, and I'm delighted he's now the mountain bike leader for the decathlon. So I think turning your passionate path. So that's a great group. And I'm going to do an opening round and just ask them all about the kind of growth question first. Just get their underlying thoughts on what the growth question means to them in terms of impact and kind of numbers. And let me just start with Martin. I mean, you've seen growth, I'm sure. You've seen increased usage. But as an environmentalist, how are you seeing that in your level and in your work?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, very much for having me in this round. It's nice to see that this group is growing year by year. It's very encouraging. At the university in Zurich, we've been looking at impact of recreational activities for more than 15 years. And what we can observe is really an increased pressure on natural areas and trail systems, especially forests close to cities. This is lately, of course, due to COVID also, and higher frequencies of almost all human activities in recreational areas. Now, what could be the effects now on the environment? Of course, mountain biking can cause degradation and erosion of existing trail infrastructure, and in some cases lead to new unplanned or illegal infrastructure. And this is because there is not enough existing needs-based or user-friendly infrastructure or trails sometimes. For example, also the area here of Zurich, the forests are full of mountain bikers, and they kind of find their own way if they don't have their trails in front of their house. Now, another thing is new behavior patterns like night riding, for example. We looked in one study, I presented it, I think 3 years ago in this round, where we looked at the effects on wildlife, but we only looked at the effects on roe deer. Of course, you have to get the broader picture. And also lately, like a larger radius of action due to electrification of the mountain bikes. But yeah, so these are like new developments also that lead to more emotional discussions around the protection and use of natural areas, of recreational forests, regarding environmental and social conflicts. Wildlife is a big topic, landscape, of course. Yeah, so yeah, that I think these are more or less the main points.
Thanks. Let me take Matthew. I mean, you are a brand synonymous with some of those values that even Martin's research might kind of show are at risk and underpin, but you've just come into this market. What's brought Patagonia in as a new entrant? I think you came in just before COVID, so it can't be the recent growth. What excites you about mountain biking as a growth area?
Well, a lot of things, but actually I would first point out that it's actually not our first foray into mountain biking. We actually made our first mountain bike product back in 1991, which was a padded short. And in the decade that followed, we made various iterations of those shorts and cycling jerseys too. But yeah, you are quite right. It's certainly a renewed push on our part. And away from the growth, I think the first motivator for us is that within the Patagonia employee community, we participate. There is a strong mountain biking contingent, both here in Europe /EMEA, where I'm based, and also at our global headquarters in North America. So the first thing was that many of us are very keen mountain bikers, so it's a sport that we love. And then more broadly, mountain biking fits with our direction in outdoor sports, I would say, and our ethos about the sports that we want to do and make product for. So a point there, you know, mountain biking is synonymous with human-powered adventure in wild spaces, which is at the core of Patagonia, a company that was born out of climbing and clean climbing. And through mountain biking, people connect with the outdoors. And synonymous with all of that is community and advocacy and a reverence for the spaces where you do your sport, and hopefully the intention to protect those places. So for all those reasons, mountain biking feels like a space that's right for us and somewhere that we certainly want to be. And in terms of a goal, And I apologize because there's some noise with someone pushing a large trolley past my apartment window. A goal for us is being a part of the conversation in mountain biking as this sport grows. And as many people have alluded to on this summit already, the sport is growing exponentially. So we want to be part of the conversations about how this sport grows and to play the part that we can. And we want to partner with people in this space. And that means end users, ambassadors, retailers, magazines, mountain bike event companies who have ethics and values similar to ours, and people we can partner with in our mission statement, which is to save the home planet and through sport, and this sport in particular.
Thank you. That's a passionate and supportive evocation, I think, of what many of us are here for. But you mentioned community, and that's a great way to leap across to Morten, who has come through community into making this his job and his work. And Morten, I mean, what are you seeing? What's going on in your numbers? What's going on in your community? Are you any evidence that it's the same people riding lots more, or are we on a kind of really, is the outgrowth there in your world too?
Yeah, we have seen some incredible numbers the last year, or since COVID started in March. March 2020, we saw over the next 4 weeks from the COVID were closed the country down. We saw an explosion where we actually went up to the users of our app to index 10 times more users just within 4 weeks. So that was pretty amazing. And what is also amazing is that level have stayed that high since. We have seen new users, and we see a lot of other user groups. So the behavior of the users is also different. We can see on especially easy trails, well-built blue trails, they have a higher usage than other trails. So we have a lot of data, but we haven't been analyzing into the bottom of how the individual users changes during time. But we can see a lot of new users actually spend time on those blue trails. And there has also been other movements that have been easy to see. And back to the new users, it looks like that they are traveling more. They are seeing more different trails than the old user group. So they have another kind of behavior. They are doing more exploration of the trails. It's hard to say if that's COVID or the push we actually are doing in the app to go out and explore the world. So I can't tell what is what, but we can see that if we look into the average of our average users, they actually try a new trail every month. So 12 new trails a month. And they track in average about 2.1 times a week. So they often change trails. So that's one of the things we've seen, some of the things we've seen.
Great. And Clément, I mean, you see huge numbers, your business has global reach. What are you seeing in your do you know about your new consumers? Do you know where they're coming from? Do you know much about their buying patterns at this early stage? What does Decathlon see?
Hello, Kevin. Thank you for our invitation. Of course, for mountain bike see an increase in sales in 20 and in 21 also in first semester. Of course, the global cycling sports are boosted because of the context. We know all of it. Because we can practice it with safety, because of the fresh air, and for fun because of the evasion topic and versus the quarantine. And we met, for example, 78% of French people say in the last survey last week that they need to go outside and to be in contact with nature. And why MTB bigger compared to other practice of bikes? In Decathlon, we say we can analyze 3 main reasons. The first one is the pandemic context is reinforcing empty bikers, mountain bikers, I mean regular riders, to practice more for the same reasons as before, needs of evasion in local, in outdoor, and these people save money because less restaurants, less party, less holidays, less trips, less everything. So they put more money in bike and equipment. This is the first reason. The second one is if we focus now on first range of bikes and e-bikes, we can count the classic empty bikers, but also two other types of customers. I mean, teenagers who love the sporty style of mountain bike, and also parents also prefer MTB because more robust, more resistant. And also active people who prefer robust bikes instead of very adapted bikes, I mean city bikes, to move from A to B. They prefer this MTB also in case of, in case of they would ride in forest 1 or 2 times in the year with friends. The third main reason is new mountain bikers and or coming back mountain bikers. I mean, all people ex mountain bikers who come back with EMTB. We can see with sales, but also on trails every weekend. When we ride, we can show we can see that mountain bikers are more and more on tracks. I've never seen so much people on trails since last May 20. We can see that some of them are new. They wear very old helmets or no helmet, or fully equipped bike with many accessories but no garment, no equipment. So we can see also they are not so smooth on the bikes. They start riding very late in the Sunday morning in the rush hour, and everybody in the same place, in the same most accessible areas. So I think EMTB increased the range of new mountain bikers, or all generations who stop in the past mountain bike and they come back with the EMTB. Yeah, I think robustness, the contact with the nature, the funny side are the 3 main reasons of bigger mountain bike sales. And EMTB is also a good opportunity to provide this market, to push this market.
Thank you. And that's an interesting thought. If you follow the diversity session previously, they're not like us. A few of them might be, as we hear, old school and have come back, but there's a lot of people in there who are not traditionally part of the mountain bike community, and that's an interesting part. And Martin, going now on the kind of sustainability route, what are you seeing in terms of behavior and environmental impact? And is that changing because these are different people with different bikes from different backgrounds, different communities? Does that have an effect?
Well, what we see is mountain biking is really here. Is really here to stay, and we have to find solutions, I think. So I think the most important measure is to improve infrastructure and build more needs-based and user-friendly infrastructure, and address these different segments and user groups of mountain bikers, and then also apply and communicate clear rules. I think that's one of the most important measures, actually, to define the rules and also to educate people, and not only the mountain bikers, but also all the stakeholders when it comes to planning. And therefore we need more best case examples and more research also. And that's what we're trying to do to create more evidence to kind of neutralize emotional discussions also, because it's usually a very emotional discussed topic.
Interesting. Matthew, when I was getting my pre-briefing for this session, I understood that maybe at Patagonia, you've even reached a conclusion from your research that maybe mountain bikers are different, maybe less sensitive to the environment, or there's some challenges in our community that are different from other outdoor sports. Have I understood that correctly? And what's kind of behind, or what have you been finding?
No, I wouldn't actually necessarily say that. I wouldn't say that outdoor sports people from all of the outdoor sports are viewed in any single way. I think there's nuances across the outdoor sports, and we're engaged in various sports from mountain sports through to surfing and fly fishing. And I think also there are nuances within the sport. And if we take, let's say, skiing as an example, you have the backcountry skier who gets up to go ski touring at pre-sunrise and wants to do a long day in the mountains, and they're more akin to an endurance athlete. And then you have perhaps in the same mountain range the possibly younger rider who wants to hit sliders and send it off kickers. And that means that these two people are perceived very differently within a sport. And I think mountain biking is the same, as Anila alluded to earlier. It's a sport with very different people and very different subgenres within it. So I don't think that mountain bikers are necessarily perceived in a certain way, but I think there are some negative perceptions from the external world. And I think all mountain bikers get tarred with that brush. So I think some people would perceive mountain bikers as being somewhat fast and dangerous. It's perceived as a noisy trail using group. There is a belief, sometimes correct, but of course not always, that mountain bikers damage trails. And I think there is also perhaps a misguided view among some trail users that mountain bikers are adrenaline fueled and antisocial. And I think the reality, of course, is that mountain bikers are not like that. And there are many mountain bikers who have a very different spirit and different motivations. But I think that the negative perceptions that the sport's been lumbered with for certainly since I was getting into mountain biking as a 10-year-old, I think the reality is that is a challenge that mountain bikers have to work through, the mountain bike community has to work through. And our concern at Patagonia is that as the sport grows, and it is of course a growing sport, that mountain bikers will be singled out and excluded and won't have a seat at the table when it comes to ensuring that this sport can grow and mountain bikers can have access to legal trails and be trusted partners in the outdoors.
Thank you. I mean, it takes me again and go to Morten. I mean, you've said already your new users are different. Are they the same? Are they easier to build into the community and become part of the movement? Or are you seeing any other differences other than their kind of riding behavior? You're muted, I'm afraid.
Now you probably can hear me.
Yes.
I think the new users we see as more loyal users of our app because of they need information about where the good trails are and what is legal trails. And we see a lot of them actually don't know much about mountain biking, don't know much of how they get into there. What we see in Denmark, I don't think the clubs is growing as fast as the numbers of mountain bikers. We see about 2% or something like that. There is in a club, so the need for information about new mountain bikers is very high. So we actually see they uses our app a lot more than the old mountain bikers to get information about where to meet next time and which trail to ride. So that is quite different. And hopefully we can help new mountain bikers to get good experience on legal trails.
Good. And Clement, I mean, in the past, I've hit the enormous reach of Decathlon through social media, through Facebook groups, through kind of customers there. What role can a global company play in the education, the development, the support for the newer riders in how and where they ride, as well as obviously buying the product?
Yeah, I think EMTB growth could bring some positive impacts, but also some risks. For sure, thanks to EMTB, people won't stop to like EMTB for the coming years because of sporty engines, robustness, contact with nature, more accessible, etc. Healthcare for many of them also. But some risks like deterioration of the nature, the accidents with runners, walkers, with hunters, with owners of private lands. We can see some difficulties or with sort of blocking with parks and national parks because of all accidents we can meet. We can see also many crash, especially for beginners, because e-bikes allows them to go far and to be lost, to climb hills or mountains too much technical, too much difficult for them. So I think we really need to manage the riding area, to avoid accidents, to avoid the crash, to make preventive protection of the nature and people and animals and everything. To learn actually men, women, kids about the nature. And I think I trust in mountain bikers to respect rules and to make the good path about it. I think industry of bikes, we can also make some smart garment to help the ride of mountain bike and the field of ride, the trails. So that's it.
Yeah, thank you. Good. Well, I've got time, I think, for one more round in terms of this session, and I think the question I saw in the chat, and I think is a question I had in my mind coming in. I mean, we're on the call now. We're with users, community-based apps, brands, researchers. I mean, you've all got your different experiences. Clement, you've been a sportsman, in that kind of step. If we actually conclude how we make mountain biking not only sustainable, but communicate to the outside world that is sustainable, who do you think are the key players that have to kind of do that in the coming years? And in that sense, and then maybe you have your own personal view or a kind of corporate view from any of you. So just as a closing word, just for each of you, who's going to do this? And perhaps I'll come back to you, Clement. You said, there is a role for industry, but your last word, I mean, who's going to do this education and sustainability and good trails and this kind of thing?
I think we have all of us a responsibility to the nature and to bikers. For my part, I mean, like a brand, we have a community of users and customers. I think we have to speak to them, to explain them the rules, the impact we can make, and the protection we have to apply. I think we have a sort of learning responsibility, and we have a second role is about the products, to make it more smarter, to make it cleaner, cooler as well. So yeah, for my conclusion is education or sort of learning to customers and to work on products to make them better for them and for the nature. Thank you.
Martin, environmental protection, whose job is it in our community?
In my opinion, like I said, dissemination of knowledge is very important. And we start, of course, at the university to educate students. I think education is important. It's important to educate the kids also in riding programs, etc. But then the scene is getting organized also, like in Switzerland now we have IMBA Switzerland, and I think this will be also a channel to educate the riders. But then it's also a task of the authorities, of course, to kind of get the knowledge to the people also in the right way.
Thank you. Morten, almost the same question. Whose job is it to carry this forward from your point of view of your work and your community, your experience?
I think we all have a role in that. And what we are actually doing is we are inviting all our users in to be a part of the national organizations so they can have a voice. And the national organizations also can have a voice that can be heard of all mountain bikers. So we like to see ourselves as a speaker for that good intention. And we also have a role in helping out building new trails. So we actually decided to give 20% of our subscription revenue directly back to all the building of new trails. So I think we all have a role, and our mission is actually to getting more people to ride and get them together and helping developing this sport. So we all have a role, I think.
Thank you. And Matthew, I'm going to give you the last word on this one, but perhaps just a question to add supplementary is there any other sector we could look to that you think does it well? This kind of responsibility and values and sustainability that mountain biking could refer to?
There is, and I actually would highlight a few. I mean, first one, the discussion about as the sport grows, who's responsible? That is very much akin to the discussion in climbing, rock climbing. There's been an explosion in indoor climbing in recent years. And then during COVID, with gyms closed across the world, there was even an increased use of outdoor climbing areas. And the discussion there was, whose job is it to police this? And the answer for climbing and indeed for mountain biking, in my mind, is everyone. So if we take industry as an example, brands have a responsibility in the products that they make, in their messaging, to educate people about the impact that this sport has, and to consider if people in the mountain bike sector want to massively expand and grow their business, how's that going to work with the finite resources that we have to both make the products that we use and the trails that we ride. I think beyond just brands, if you include magazines as an industry body, I think the mountain bike media has a real responsibility to be really talking about trail advocacy and the responsible introduction onto the trails of new people as they come into the sport. And I also think that if we consider ambassadors and athletes who are sponsored by brands as part of the industry, then they also have I would say a responsibility to show leadership in that space and to be a part of this discussion. But then if we go away just from industry, I think let's look at the community. You know, when I was growing up mountain biking, it was where I'm from in Northeast England, somewhat counterculture. The trails, which were built by people who were grown-ups, I was much younger, there was definitely not permission to be riding on those trails. I would not say the mountain bike community was a good partner on that area of woodland where our trails were being developed whatsoever. So I think that the community, people taking part in the sport, have a role in being good partners in using outdoor and wild spaces, and being a part of the discussion with other users of the outdoors, connecting with other stakeholders and ensuring that we are expanding the sport safely, we are considering other people's viewpoints, and we're not making ourselves unpopular in the process. And to answer your question about sports where I think there has been perhaps an increase in environmental awareness as the sports have grown, I would actually point to two. The first one would be surfing. So back in the 90s and then into the early noughties and up to now, you had organizations, grassroots NGOs run by surfers, such as Surfers Against Sewage, who were educating and engaging surfers in the risk that was faced by them because of pollution, and then after that, plastic pollution, and now in the surf community, there are very few surfers who are not on board with that message and would scoff at the idea of being a part of a beach clean and would not want to be a part of collective efforts to prevent these forms of pollution in their space. I'm not saying all surfers are perfect, but it's accepted within the community that that's a viable thing to be connected with. And then if we look at mountain sports, and if we look at snowboarding and skiing in particular, sorry, just someone walking into the room there. If we look at how, as skiing and snowboarding have grown, organizations such as Protect Our Winters have also grown in tandem with these sports, and how they've been imbuing in skiers and snowboarders a spirit of environmental awareness and connecting them in the fight against climate change because of the impact it will have on their natural playgrounds. I think those are two good examples of sports where the community, with support from brands, have really come together to address the environmental impact of their sports as they've grown and as more people have become a part of those communities.
Great. Well, we've run out of time, sadly. And again, like all of our panels, this is almost, I think we're almost booked the next 3 years summits, IMBA team, in terms of we'll have a session on each of these and they'll be really big. And I can see the crossover from this discussion with the previous panelists are now ferociously engaged in the chat, building up the kind of whole storytelling. So that's there's a lot of feedback there and a lot of maybe comments that you'll be able to follow up in the next half an hour and after this session. But again, our virtual applause from everyone to our panelists. Thank you very much for your contribution today. And my job to kind of wrap this one. And our last session is actually, we've moved from kind of people to sustainability and growth, and now we're going to go to places. And I'm delighted to invite my fellow board member from IMBA, Catherine Shearer, who is the founder of H&I Adventures. We all want to go on mountain bike holidays, don't we, Catherine? More than anything else that's on the list. So she's going to take on the next panel, which is investing in more MTB-friendly places. So over to you, Catherine.
Thank you, Kevin, and really big thanks to all of our panelists so far. The discussions have been incredibly, really high level and really interesting. And as Kevin said, I think there will be lots of connection and lots of networking happening after this. So our next panel is focusing on investing on more mountain biking friendly places, and that's both from a local community perspective and a wider tourism perspective. And we're really delighted to have on our last panel 3 really expert speakers from different parts of the industry and different countries indeed. First of all, I'd like to introduce Mathilde Sko Christensen, research assistant at the University of Southern Denmark, who has recently completed a master's in sport and health science, conducting research into the co-production of mountain bike trails in Denmark, which we're looking forward to hearing about. Then we have Lars Vro Jensen, project manager of the DIRT project, DIRT and Erasmus Plus project, which was mentioned previously and is focusing on creating formal educational frameworks for trail builders. And Lars has also been involved in helping the Hallandal region of Norway to become a mountain bike tourism destination. And last but not least, we have Diana Garcia Trujillo, who is Master in Sustainable Tourism Destinations and Regional Planning, and also author of a really pertinent report at the moment called When We Can Travel Again. So yeah, as I say, we have this local community perspective and also this, and there's also linking into a tourism perspective of mountain biking friendly destinations. And if I could start with you, Mathilde, it would be great to hear a little bit more about your research. So you've been conducting research on the co-production of mountain bike trails in Denmark, as I mentioned, and one aspect of that research focuses on how the public sector and local communities work together to co-develop trails in Denmark. And it would be I'm really keen to hear from your research, what kind of collaborative partnership models between the 3 major stakeholders, that's the local mountain bike groups, the municipalities and the land management agencies, what sort of collaborative partnership models have you identified between these stakeholders?
Yes, thank you, Catherine. In one of our studies, we have identified 3 different ways or models of co-production in trail building. And we have examined how trail building is organized and practiced in 3 Danish municipalities, which have all been given high priority to trail building. And in all the 3 models that we have identified, both voluntary trail builders and municipal employees and local departments of the Danish Nature Agency are involved. And the volunteers are contributing to both the development, the planning, and the construction of the trails. And usually it's also the volunteers who takes the initiative to build new trails in these municipalities. However, there are also some differences between the models, which seem to affect the settings for trail building in each municipality. And first, we have identified a model which mainly are characterized by the fact that the municipality has hired a professional trail builder full-time who contributes to the development and the planning and the construction of the trails. And he also takes care of the communication between the volunteers and the public authorities. And hiring a professional trail builder on one hand can make the trail building more manageable for the volunteers, and it can make it easier to have more trails built in a shorter span time. But on the other hand, it also involves a risk that the responsibility is in a way taken away from the volunteers, and that can make it more difficult to recruit strongly committed trail builders. And furthermore, it's important to keep in mind also that building more trails also require more maintenance. And if you as a municipality want the volunteers to contribute to the maintenance of the trails, you have to be aware that you have to ensure a balance between the ambitions of the authorities and the actual capacity among the volunteers. Secondly, we have also identified a model which is characterized by the fact that the different voluntary groups are united in one overall trail builder association, which takes care of all the communication between the volunteers and the public authorities. In a way, this gives the volunteers a stronger voice in this collaborative partnership, but at the same time, it can increase the distance between the single trail builder on the track and then the authorities. This model is also characterized by the fact that the trail building actually has reached the annual budget in the present municipality, which means that the voluntary trail builders are guaranteed, more or less, a certain amount of economic support each year. And this seems to make it easier for the trail builders to work on more long-term plans, in contrast to those volunteers who have to continuously apply for funding. Yeah. And then we have the third model, which is characterized by the voluntary trail builder groups working individually. So they handle all the communication with the public authorities by themselves. And in that way, they have a close connection to the authorities, each voluntary trail builder club or association, but at the same time, it leaves each association with a huge task, while they have the responsibility for all the process in trail building. Yeah. So based on our findings, we cannot determine one model as better than the other, but hopefully describing different ways of organizing and practicing this trail building we can inspire everyone with interest in this area to work on co-production in trail building. And hopefully it can shed light on some of the possibilities and some of the dilemmas which can be relevant to have in mind working on collaborative partnerships in trail building.
You mentioned in one of the models there can be, where the volunteers are really active and are taking responsibility, there can be perhaps a difference in the volunteer competencies and the ambitions of the municipality, and that comes into Lars. You're working on the DIRT project, project manager for the DIRT project, which IMBA Europe is involved with also, and what the aim of the DIRT project is to develop this proper educational framework for trail builders, and with your work in the Hallingdal region of Norway, which is historically a winter destination, a winter tourism destination. Now they're looking at the summer tourism perspective and see mountain biking as the key to that. The Hallingdal region has, as part of this, invested heavily. Can you explain the rationale behind that with your work with the region and how it relates to the project?
Sorry, Catherine, I was just wondering, can you just repeat the last part of your question, because your sound is really low, so I don't know if you can move maybe closer to the mic. That would help a lot. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, I was just saying that the start of, is that better? As part of the transition from winter tourism destination to summer tourism destination, the Hallingdal region has invested in mountain biking and invested in the education of trail builders to achieve that. And I wondered if you could explain the rationale behind that and how it relates to the DIRT project.
Yeah, I can. As you say, traditionally the Hallingdal region is really big in winter. In fact, it's the biggest tourism region in all of Norway, and so we have had an interest in order to sort of bridge the gap for a lot of businesses struggling to make an all-year operation and employing people all year round to increase business in the summertime. And our focus on mountain biking started around 2015, and we had a really thorough strategy process to really see sort of where opportunities were in the mountain bike market. And the Norwegian mountain bike community is quite small, really. So a consequence of that process was that we understood that our main target group is in fact not the current mountain bike market of Norway. It's in fact the people who haven't started riding yet. And of course, like I said, we have a lot of people here in the winter time who are active families and who enjoy spending time outdoors, and they're quality conscious, and they expect to have a wide variety of slopes and ski slopes and cross-country tracks. And so looking at what we had in front of our door, we understood that the trails here, they were just way too hard. The barrier was way too big for this new market to actually enter the mountain bike activity. So that's what actually started our focus on developing this new infrastructure of primarily green and blue difficulty trails, and that of course also ties into the DIRT project, because who's going to build those trails? We didn't have any trail building community here, and certainly not one that was capable of delivering trails of sort of high enough quality and with the right competence to sort of build sustainably and so on and so forth. So more or less our development of trail infrastructure has been going hand in hand with developing the local trail building community. We're currently investing 20 million euros, and we're about halfway since we started in 2015. The current project phase will probably end in 3 to 4 years. What we see is that through sort of nurturing the trail building community, we've also spiraled the trail building industry to grow significantly. So from having one employed trail builder in 2016, we currently have two of the biggest trail building companies located in the Hallingdal region. They employ a total of 30 full-time trail builders at the moment. So you can say that it's certainly been a journey from we started this process, and of course having formed more or less a new industry, that's where the DIRT project and sort of the formalization of the trail building competence comes in and becomes necessary in order for us to secure that we have the right people to build trails, and that the trail building company can actually hire people with the right competence, and also in the competition with general construction companies and I would say amateurs coming in and competing on price, they can also sort of win that competition by showing that they have a formal competence in trail building. So more or less, I mean, the DIRT project has been the natural next step for the development that we have had in the Hallingdal region, I would say.
Yeah, and that seems like a huge investment, really, for the region. What you mentioned families, you mentioned beginner mountain bikers. What other target audiences are you looking to reach with in Hallingdal, and what's been the return on investment for the region, I guess, beyond the perhaps tourism income?
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that as one of the leading regions for winter tourism, I mean, that goes hand in hand with having a strong local skiing culture, and that's a culture that we've been building over years and years and years. And it's actually been a clear focus for us that if we're going to build a destination, one of the best mountain bike destinations in Scandinavia, which is the goal of this project, we also need to nurture a strong local riding community. So sort of the steps that we are taking have been really focusing on also building local facilities, building pump tracks close to schools around the village centers, so that we can get kids, parents into riding. And I think we need people who works in the tourism industry. We need locals who guests will meet when they come here to reflect mountain biking as well, because that is what eventually is going to give us sort of the authenticity as a mountain bike destination. We can't just, I mean, mountain biking is not just a product. It's not just something that we do. It's something that we are, and that's obviously not something that we solve in the 5 years that we've been working. And I would love to present impact study that could show exactly what we got back from the investments we've done so far. We're actually doing a study next year, but so far we can see that it's definitely the interest is picking up all around amongst guests, but also among the local kids. We see mountain bikes lined up by the schools, and we see that the mountain bike trail centers and pump tracks have become new hangouts that we didn't have previously. So suddenly the kids who normally hang out in the ski resort in the winter, they now have a similar place that they can actually hang out and socialize in the summertime. So it's a huge deal for us.
Yeah. Just before we bring in Diana on the tourism front, the research that she's been doing, Mathilde, from your experience in Denmark, why do these municipalities believe it's important to invest in mountain biking infrastructure, and what's their return on investment in Denmark?
Yeah, in the 3 municipalities that we have examined, there seems to be several reasons for investing in these mountain bike trails. First of all, the municipalities find it important in a health promotion context, providing better possibilities for nature experiences and different kind of sports are seen to provide better health for citizens and well-being. And furthermore, they see a potential in the trails in terms of attracting tourists and new residents to the municipality. Actually, they see these trails as a way to brand the municipality and to create a clear local identity. The hope is that by supporting the volunteers, the municipalities can help create active and attractive local communities within the municipality. And then they also seem to think that by supporting the trail builders in building attractive and exciting sustainable trails, they can help guide the traffic in the nature areas in a way that it becomes possible to take care of nature, and in a way that it also leaves space for different kind of user groups and not only mountain bikers.
Okay, no, that is really interesting, and you can see that there are clear links between the local community and building the local community, and then starting to build a tourism destination around mountain biking. And I'd just like to ask Diana about your research, which led to the report "When We Can Travel Again," which is the question everyone is asking at the moment. And it has uncovered some really interesting findings with regard to the recommendations for the travel industry itself, and also with regard to traveller behaviour and potential traveller behaviour. So from the industry perspective, what we've seen in the travel industry is in response to COVID-19, in response to this the cessation of travel, is the way that they have responded is with innovation and diversification. Do you, in your opinion, and looking at the research that you've carried out, do you think this was the push that the travel and tourism needed towards moving more purposefully in the direction of a more sustainable model?
Well, thank you, Catherine, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, I believe since the pandemic started, there are two very common words. One of them was to reinvent, and the other one was to adapt, right? So we've seen that in terms of innovation in tourism products and the safety and security of destinations, it has actually been a very important factor for the industry survival. We can see that innovation is actually a very good competitive advantage for businesses, for operators, and for destinations as well. And we can definitely see how it can increase destination attractiveness and also tourism business attractiveness as well. And for the tourist and the local community, it can actually increase their level of satisfaction. For example, for tourists, because they can have a better tourism experience, and for the local community because they couldn't stand before the pressure of tourism anymore, right? In terms of moving from mass tourism or less responsible practices towards a more sustainable tourism model that was actually needed before even the pandemic started, because we all know that our resources are finite, right? We all know that the community has to be happy and with the tourism development, and we have seen that since the pandemic started, people actually understood the importance of connecting with local cultures, with the heritage of the places that they're visiting, having a responsible use of the resources, and also about exploring destinations of proximity. I will say that with sustainability for the tourism industry and for many industries, it's not an option anymore, but it's rather the roadmap to survival of the industry.
Yeah, no, I think that's, well, it's what we've kind of been hearing previously as well, is it's not an option anymore. It's not a luxury. It's something it's a road we have to take. And having listened a bit to the other speakers, to Lars and to Mathilde, and the work that they've done in their mountain biking communities, how do you see mountain bike tourism playing a part in this more sustainable future of travel?
Well, from listening to Mathilde and Lars, I believe one of the important factors here is actually to integrate the local community and see how, for example, biking tourism can support the local infrastructure and also the local community, as Lars was actually saying with the kids. Now the kids have a means of entertainment, and they might be using their time to do this type of activity, right? I believe in terms of sustainability, for the biking tourism to be more sustainable, actually all the stakeholders need to be compromised with sustainability. And how can we do this? Well, as I said before, we actually need to integrate everyone in this, and for example, integrate the local community in all the stages of planning and development of the trails, for example. We need to see as well if the trails are actually integrating with the natural environment, right? It's very important that we actually conserve the biodiversity of the area. And for example, if there has to be a carrying capacity study to see if how many tourists the area can support. These are the type of things that we need to look at. And in terms of the community, we need to see as well that if there is any way of an economic gain that can support the development of the community, and also maybe it's something to create more jobs and these kind of things that we actually need to look at.
Yeah, I think the message that is coming quite loud and clear from everyone is of collaboration, is of finding, and it's not necessarily one model of collaboration, it's the model of collaboration that works for your area. And also this idea of having a really strong local mountain bike community as the foundations upon which mountain bike tourism more widely can then flourish as well. And I think that's a really good message, and it's something that we have seen in various destinations, and we're seeing in Denmark and Hallingdal, and it's really good to get your input in that. We have a few questions actually that have come from the audience, and first of all, actually, Mathilde, we have a question about a very practical question about insurance and liability. How do trail associations or trail builders, these stakeholders that you've talked about, how are they managing risk? How are they dealing with insurance and liability? And who takes on that responsibility?
Actually, the responsibility and the risk is up to each association of the trail builders or the single group of trail builders. It's not the municipality who take that responsibility.
Across the board, it's always the trail association that takes on that.
Or the single, or the individual person's insurance, actually, yeah.
Yeah, and is that the same in Norway, Lars? Is that how that works with insurance?
On the volunteer level, that would be your own private insurance. That's correct. And of course, as a professional trail builder, you would have an insurance covering.
Okay. Yeah. And yeah, another one for you, Lars, is about maybe after the session, if you could share, if you've got some case studies that you would be happy to share that people can learn from, in order to convince their local municipalities that hiring a trail building team is worthwhile and will show return on investment. So you've got some learning and case study to share on that. That would be fantastic.
I have a much better idea. I think everybody should come here and have a look for one of the next summits. So I'll see what I can find.
I mean, I think we're all going to come. Absolutely. Well, I think as far as I can tell, that is us at our time. And I would just really like to thank everyone for your contribution. It's been incredibly insightful and interesting, and yeah, lots to talk about, and lots of great examples of collaboration out there. And I'm sure people who are listening are very keen to hear more about that. So thank you very much.
Catherine, thank you very much, and once again our virtual applause to the panel for those thoughts there. I'm just hanging on there. Wait a minute, there's 30 people employed in one location in trail building. That's wow. Let's hang on to that for our kind of economic impact and our post-COVID and kind of one of our case studies. That's quite exciting. I think we could all imagine that if we had that in our own municipality, in our own location. We'll compete with you, Lars, right, as well as kind of get the benefits. But then my job, just to conclude, we have slightly overrun, but it's been an absolute pleasure once again to be at the IMBA Summit. I'm now looking forward to the moment we all dash outside and we ride up a mountain together, and then we come back for a kind of cool beer at the end of that. But so you can all do that at your own homes and in spirit of the IMBA community. So I hope you do. But thank you to everybody that's contributed to all of the panels, to our keynotes especially, and to our moderators. Catherine, you mentioned several times in your last wrap up there that collaboration is the word, and I think it's come out over and over. It's everybody's responsibility. Somebody said, you know, it's a chance to bring things together. And if I could but share that with everybody in terms of closing words on behalf of IMBA Europe, its partners, its supporters like Cycling Industries Europe, that we're building the community, we hope, back better at the local level, the regional level, the national level. And we know there's a base for a stronger international community of mountain biking. And that's the role we take on as IMBA Europe. Slowly over the next coming months, as though you will hear more from us, not only about our membership models, but also as we build network opportunities for people who are in charge of local places. Through things like the DIRT project, we build outcomes that are good for professionals to use in your work. And overall, we kind of travel together. So what I hope very much is that everybody kind of stays in touch. You're registered for IMBA newsletters, you're in communities. But as we build the working communities around our new IMBA mission, that we are working on inclusion, that we are working on sustainability, and we are working on great places, and with all the returns and all the benefits. So thank you, everyone. Be part of the community. Enjoy your riding. Have a fabulous summer. And we will see you as part of the IMBA Europe community in coming years and months. Thank you very much.